The Mishnah had said, the sixth chapter, second Mishnah, that a person who engages in the study of Torah, he's elevated, takes on an elevated status. How do we know this? You know, when you put on tefillin, it doesn't use that term. You become an elevated person, although you did a positive commandment. You eat matzah, you did a mitzvah, you don't become an elevated person. But yet, in regard to engaging in Torah study, you become elevated. Now, what comes to mind, we mentioned many times that just as the human body has 248 parts to it, the soul, which is the life source of a human being, has 248 components. And there's a corresponding factor between the 248 parts of the body to the 248 parts of the soul, which each one corresponds to another aspect function of the body. But simultaneously, we have 248 positive commandments, and 248 positive commandments, each one corresponds, spiritually speaking, to provide a spiritual infusion in each one of these components. Each component needs another type of infusion, and each positive commandment corresponds to a specific component, which provides that infusion of spiritual nourishment, so to say, which is part of eternity. But yet, Chazal tell us, Talmud tells us, that although each positive commandment has a value, a innate value, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, the totality of all the mitzvos, one word of Torah is the equivalent of the totality of all the positive commandments, of the whole Torah's entirety. So when we speak about mega mitzvah, all-encompassing, it generates a level of spiritual energy, spiritual sustenance, which is all-encompassing for the Jew. So when you speak about you doing one mitzvah, it empowers a certain part of the soul. When we speak about Torah, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that's the totality of the soul. The totality of the soul is brought to another level because it addresses every aspect of that soul. I'll give you an example. We mentioned yesterday, the Mishnah later speaks about there were 3 crowns that were given to the Jewish people. The crown of priesthood, Kesed Kuna, the crown of priesthood, the crown of kingship, and the crown of Torah. Who has relevance to the crown of Torah? Every Jew. Because Torah is the heritage of every Jew. It's Marosh Kilas Yaakov, it's the heritage of the congregation of Jacob. Now, but yet it says that Shem Tov, it speaks about 3 crowns, but Shem Tov, a good name, surpasses all of them. What do you mean a good name surpasses all of them? There's a crown which is called Kesed Shem Tov, the crown of a good name. But there were only 3 crowns. There's no 4th crown. The answer is that if a person goes and he has, let's say a person, he has a crown, he has a good name, but when you check, you do your due diligence on him, you realize, although in the world he has a great name, he's basically a zero. He has no values, he has no, it's not he misled people, but innately, he has nothing to offer. Nothing to offer. He has a good name, but what's a good name worth? The good name only has value because it's predicated on the crown of Torah. That surpasses all of them. Because that's when you have the crown of Torah, you bring it to that special level, that's the Kesed Shem Tov. So it's not a new crown. The crown doesn't exist independent of what preceded it. That's Kesed Shem Tov. So if Torah is the all-encompassing mitzvah, it's the totality of the person. When you put on tefillin, you don't become an elevated person. Eat matzah, you don't become an elevated person. Because that only addresses one aspect of your spirituality. When we speak about Torah, which is the totality of the person, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that elevates, Harizah Misalet, you become elevated, you become a different being. We find that the vessels in the Mishkan, and even in the first temple period, there was a vessel that was called the Aron, the Ark. What was the Ark? What was it comprised of? It was a box that was cast in gold on the inside, on the outside. It had a slab of gold that went across the top. And out of that slab of gold, there were two cherubs which were facing one another on top of that slab of gold. Inside that repository, that receptacle, you had the first set of tablets which were broken when Moshe came down from Sinai, when the Jews were involved with idolatry. The second set of tablets, which indicated our reinstatement, and you had a Sefer Torah. That's what the Ark. The Ark is representation. That is the repository of Torah. And the Torah describes what is the Ark. It's gold on the inside and on the outside. So the Talmud says that a Talmud Chacham, a Torah sage, whose Tocha Kebaro, that means his inside and outside, are in sync with one another. It's not like he looks holier on the outside, but rather that's his essence. He is the equivalent. He is a repository. He is the equivalent of the Holy Ark. Just as the Holy Ark, the divine presence had relevance to that, because that's the most special. Just having instant recall, and you can have encyclopedic knowledge, it's not enough. You have to have, it's not only talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. You have to have it fully integrated into your being. Then you're the equivalent of the Ark. And that's the symbolism on the inside and the outside. It was gold. Gold is the most precious metal, which is mentioned in the Torah. That's on the inside and the outside. Just want to make it interesting. The Ramban writes, Nachmanides writes, that the Mishkan is a replica of Sinai. What was it, Sinai? Sinai, God descended from heaven, gave the Torah to the Jewish people. And the Torah describes the Sinai event, that there was fire there, and God spoke to us, and the divine presence was there. And it was encircled by the Jews. The mountain was encircled by the Jewish people. What was the Mishkan? The Mishkan, the tabernacle, it was circumscribed with vertical beams. The Holy of Holies, which is the location of the divine presence, everything was gold. What is gold? Gold is fire. It has the same color as fire. That's fire. The Aron, the Ark was gold. The cherubs were gold. The walls were coated with gold, gold leaf. Everything was gold. The beams which encircled the Mishkan had gold leaf on them, or gold foil was attached to the beam. The beams were wood, but there was gold foil attached to them. Everything was gold. What does gold represent? That's fire. What is fire? You know, it's interesting. At the Seder, we drink 4 cups of wine. What are the 4 cups of wine all about? It's to commemorate the 4 expressions of redemption. That's what we drink, 4 cups of wine. Now, that we merited redemption of Egypt, was that based on the attribute of justice, or was that based on the attribute of mercy? When we left Egypt, we were all idolaters at the most extreme level. And if God wouldn't have redeemed us at that moment, it would have been over. We would have gone into the oblivion. So why did God take us out of Egypt? It's the ultimate level. It was chesed. Chesed. Now, it was not justice. It was not based on the attribute. Based on the attribute of justice, we have no worthiness. But based on indiscriminate kindness, that's what we merited to leave Egypt. Now, what activated the forces which allowed us to leave Egypt? The 4 expressions of redemption. When we drink the cups of wine, each one corresponds to one of the expressions of redemption. That's what happens. So originally, when I was married, the cups we used to use for the 4 cups of wine were made of glass. Glass, we measured, make sure that the volume of the glass was correct, because you have to have a certain minimum volume. That was the 4 cups of wine. Then somebody had given me a Kabbalistic Haggadah, where a Kabbalistic commentator writes that the cups that you use at the Seder should be made of silver. Why? Because silver is white, and white represents the attribute of mercy, the attribute of chesed, indiscriminate kindness. Because why did we merit redemption? Not that we were worthy, but because indiscriminate kindness. Therefore, to indicate that, the wine should be in cups of silver, because silver is white. It's silver color, but it has a whitish look. And under no circumstance should it be made of gold. Say, we have to show we're free men. Gold, definitely not. Why? Because gold represents the attribute of justice. Because gold is fire. Based on justice, we should have never gone out of Egypt. So silver, yes, gold, not. So the Mishkan itself, so what is a Talmud Chacham? A Torah sage, just as the Aron was gold on the inside and the outside, a Torah sage is only if he's consistent and integrated with what his knowledge is, it's integrated into his life, which is similar to the Aron. Okay? What is gold? Gold is the attribute of justice. What is Torah? What is the essence of Torah? The Talmud tells us it's emes. Emes means precise to the nth degree, not compromised as much as an oda. Torah is the attribute of justice. It's not rachmim, it's justice. You must do it. This is the law. You compromise the law, it's not the law anymore. I always mention him in Maral. How do you say truth in Hebrew? Emes. Or as Chaim would say, emet. Right? That's how we say it. The letter Aleph represents something which is minute, infinitesimal. If you take the Aleph away from emes, what do you have? Memtes, memtov, mes, death. It's only truthful. The Torah infuses you with life. That's only if it's exactly precise as was given at Sinai. The moment it's compromised, it's no longer that. Torah itself is the attribute of justice. The Torah sage, who's fully integrated with his Torah studies, is compared to what? He's the repository, which is the equivalent of the Aron. What was the Aron? What was contained in the Aron, in the Ark? Something which was truth on the absolute level. So something which is truth on the absolute level that's din, that's the attribute of justice. How do you display justice? That's fire. Fire is the attribute of justice. As a result of that, it was contained in a gold receptacle, which was gold on the inside and on the outside. Only then, which indicates the genuineness of it, that's where it's contained. So the Torah sage, who's a true Torah sage? He has to reflect the characteristics of the ark. That means as it was gold on the inside, it was gold on the outside, fully integrated. Only there, that's where Torah is able to be preserved. Otherwise, it's compromised. It's compromised, it's no longer Torah. You're left with Mem Tov rather with Aleph Mem Tov, which is emes. If I answered, you'll realize why the question is not a question. Okay?
We learned that in the covenant between the parts with Abraham,
God said, after so many years, you're leaving Egypt.
That's your
people, your children leaving Egypt. So it was a promise. So why was it? God said he promised. God keeps his promise.
Exactly.
That's the question. Okay, forget about the great wealth, unrelated. God keeps his promise. Now, a person says, this person's grandson, when he graduates high school, I will pay his tuition to go to Harvard, and he'll have every opportunity to excel, to go to law school, to go to medical school, whatever he wants. The grandson, and then the grandson is born with a very limited IQ. The man says, but you promised me. It's true. You have the door wide open to Harvard, but that's only if you could be educated. If you have a capacity, you have no capacity, the promise stands, but you have to have the person. The person's not there. The Jews had to meet a minimal level of criteria to be able to be worthy to draw on that promise. They minimally had to believe in God. When Moshe came and proved who he was, and they accepted it. And then afterwards, they slaughtered the deity of Egypt, and they circumcised themselves. They said, now you're qualified. But if they wouldn't have circumcised themselves or slaughtered the deity, something, you're the one with the incapacitated IQ, you have no relevance to God. So therefore, despite the fact that we were at those minimal level, God provided the opportunities to bring us over the top to be able to begin that ascent, which ultimately culminated with Sinai, to become God's people. There's a term in Hebrew, and whenever this term is used, it indicates the attribute of justice. When God sent the angels to destroy Sodom, it was cosmic destruction when it was destroyed. It says, Vayashkev al pnei Sodom. The word is Vayashkev. It doesn't say Vayiru, it's Vayashkev. They gazed. What's the difference between looking at something and gazing at something? When you gaze, it's a more penetrating, focused look. That means you look at every detail. You see every nuance of whatever you're looking at. So it says that expression is used when we're speaking about the attribute of justice is being implemented. Why? The attribute of justice means it's precise. God is not letting anything go. Mercy means even though you're guilty this, God's going to give you 25 chances, 100 chances, a lifetime of chances. That's the attribute of mercy. Doesn't mean at the end of the day, you're not going to pay the debt, but God will give you every chance to make corrections and to advance your life. The attribute of justice means it's precise. You deal with the issues exactly as they are, and they have to be addressed immediately. That's the attribute of justice. Vayashkev, he gazed upon them. He gazed upon them. He saw every nuance of their evil, and therefore it reached a level of intolerance. And because it was intolerated, it had to be expunged. It had to be destroyed. Okay? So therefore, the Talmud says we also find that same term when it comes to give charity, to give the tithes to the Kohen, to the Levi, to the poor. Why? You walk. How many people notice a poor person? Very few. When I say notice, he's poor, but that you're touched by the poor person. If you go and you see his issues, his needs as a human being, it's almost impossible not to assist him at some level. So why don't you? The answer is because you gloss over it. You don't get too involved in it. You don't want to know too much about it. Because the moment you know all the details, what happens? You don't want to get pulled in. So therefore, that same term that's used by the attribute of justice is used by the attribute of mercy at the most extreme level. Positive. Why? Because normally, what is the attribute of justice? God is very precise. He notices every detail. This person, because he noticed the detail, the small print of this guy's life, and that's why you responded. Therefore, that will counter the attribute of justice that you should be worthy of the attribute of mercy for that reason. That's the measure for measure in the positive for that reason. Why is there mercy? When it came to stone, there was no mercy. Why not? Everybody has one thing. Mercy is only if there's a point, a purpose of having mercy. I'll give you another chance. Let's say we reach a point, there's no hope you're going to change. So what's the point? What are we wasting our time? When a person dies, as long as you're alive, you can always do tshuva. You can always turn over a leaf and change your way. Therefore, there's always the attribute of mercy because there's always hope for change. But once a person dies, you can't change anymore. So therefore, you pay the price. Whatever the debt is, you got to pay that price. That's the understanding.